When you think about campaigning, it's putting your life on hold to do it. It's a competition. And I think that we often forget that it's a competition. You're competing with other people for a vote and asking people, frankly, to show up physically somewhere and cast it for you, who they probably don't know, right?
Have you ever thought about who makes up your city government, specifically the city council? When things go wrong in the city, we're quick to blame the council. In fact, our last video showed just what can go wrong in government.
24 billion liters of sewage over 4 years, and they didn't want us to know about it.
But being a councillor is an extremely difficult job, and the good councillors that do the work are sacrificing and doing more than you probably imagine they do. So in this video, I sat down with Ward 2 candidate Kroetsch for the 2018 municipal Hamilton election to go over 5 things that you should know about what your councillors do during the election period. Here's number 1.
A lot of things come into how that works. Number 1, how do you manage the time you might have with a full-time or part-time job? I think a big part of it is getting used to this idea that you are going to be places. Your face is going to be places. Your body is going to be places. Your voice is going to be places. But when you have a whole box of cards printed with your face on and you're distributing them, that think of that through first. What are you comfortable with this idea of being a public figure? Once you run, whether you win or lose, many people in the public will approach you, they'll ask to talk to you, they'll see you and they'll think, hey, this person's interested in my community, so I'm going to reach out to them. And so that's something you can't really turn off. The other piece, of course, is people's personal lives. I think that we forget that councillors do have those, and that makes up a part of their day, their families, their children, their friends, their chosen families. All those things compete for their time in any given day. And I think lastly, it's important to say, I don't think councillors do weekends, right? Like every day of the week is just another day of the week, right? A Saturday and a Sunday, which might be sacred in a typical 5-day work week, aren't as sacred for councillors who are still doing stuff 7 days a week usually. I also think it's super important to surround yourself with people who share your values. I mean, that sounds real hokey when I say it that way, right? Like share your values, but I mean that, like, when you're forming campaign teams or volunteers or people around you, I think it's super important. There are a lot of little technical pieces to running a campaign that most people don't know about, like getting nominations, filling paperwork out, showing up to the clerk's office, getting certified, all this kind of stuff. Find someone who you trust or know who can give you a bit of that guidance. Sometimes it's a lawyer, sometimes it's just someone who has a lot of information, or just reach out to the city. They have literally election staff there who are working in between elections, during elections, who have this information, who'd be happy to help you. So that's a real resource. Last thing I'll say is the Ministry of Municipal Affairs is also a good resource. They're also there in between elections, and they're the ones who run the legal part of elections in cities in Ontario. Reach out to them too if you have questions. So there's a huge support network, but I think doing that work's important, right? Like having that thought journey of, hey, what are the things I need to do here? What are the boxes to tick off? There are so many barriers to campaigning, so many barriers to candidates, I think, moving forward and wanting to put their name in the hat. We know, for instance, like women being asked multiple times to run, racialized folks being asked multiple times to run before they will, whereas others will run the first time they're asked, or sometimes they'll just put their name in the hat.
So I tried to go through and find the information on how to become a city councillor. You look up Google, your trusty sidekick, and alas, there is no information that says how to become a city councillor. So then you think, well, the city of Hamilton has got to have some information on it. Imagine you're someone who's been told that they would be a great city councillor, or someone who just wants some more information. So you go to the city council website and look, there's a whole bunch of city councillors, and you think there's got to be some information on how to become a city councillor. So you look around and no, there's information on how to get the mayor to congratulate you, how to become an international business delegate, but nothing on how you would start that process of becoming a city councilor. So how can we call this an open and accessible municipality when there's no information on how to challenge the status quo?
Obviously, those kinds of barriers that exist, and we know about that from lots of the studies that have been done on municipal and other elections. And traditionally speaking, it's been very not diverse on our city councilor, right? So Matthew Green, I think, was the first Black man to be elected as city councilor. Narinder Nan's the first racialized woman to be elected city councilor. And those things happened in 2014 and 2018. But the other thing is, of course, like a financial barrier. And it's a matter of privilege, a matter of time, and a matter of circumstance. Like you got to get campaign clothes and campaign haircuts and things like that, right? And those kinds of things, maybe to sort of play the part. But I think it's also about, can you afford to give up a certain amount of income in a year?
To get a general idea of how expensive running an election is, we took a look at a CBC article that showed expenses for the winner and runner-up, and found that the winner of the race tends to push their spending to the limit. It can cost up to $20,000. If the candidate can't fundraise enough to cover the cost, a lot of that needs to come from their own pocket. And like Cameron says, campaigning becomes a full-time job. In his 2018 campaign, his team shared more than 30,000 pieces of campaign literature, door knocking between July and the election in October. That's 4 months of time away from his job. And Cameron acknowledges that he's one of the lucky ones.
I totally recognize the fact that like I have enough privilege I can be doing these kinds of things. And that does limit, though, the folks who are going to show up at the table.
For many people, campaigning competitively isn't feasible. Out of all these bids, not one was less than $1,000.
Those who are going to have a better ability to run are those who are going to be planning a couple of years or a year ahead. If you make the decision more at the last minute, it's going to be a lot harder to do, right? Especially in the wards that you're in. I think that it also matters that we're encouraging and making space for candidates who might not feel like they're qualified. That happens a lot. There are no qualifications to be a councillor. You don't need a university education. You don't need any kind of qualification to become a councillor. Anyone can be. And I think that we have to break those barriers down, because without having people with lived experience sitting around that table, we lose something. We lose this ability to connect to voters, I think. But the idea should be that there's representation across the city from all kinds of folks who can speak to one another about their experiences, learn and make informed decisions, because I think Canada is changing. And I think that the people who are in positions of authority need to be reflective of the people who are also out in the population.